So our next guest had an interesting conversation with law enforcement, and it led to a subject that I think we want to talk about. And he's the perfect guy to talk about it because he's had firsthand experience and he is a Second Amendment attorney. So I've asked CJ Grisham to come on the show. How are you, CJ?
Yeah, I'm doing well. How are you today?
Good, man. Thanks for taking the time and talking with us. I really appreciate it. First off, you're an attorney. What got you into the law?
Being falsely arrested 4 times.
Really? So you were not an
yeah.
attorney before, and then you decided to go to law school after being arrested 4 times?
Yeah, I'm actually a 21-year Army veteran. I was a counterintelligence special agent. I did counterterrorism and counter narcotics and stuff like that in the Army for 21 years. And then after I got out, well, actually just before I got out, I started Open Carry Texas to try and fix our gun laws here in Texas. And then through Open Carry Texas, I and many of our members kept getting arrested for lawful carry. And at one point, I finally just said, F this, I'm going to law school. And 46 years old, I went to law school.
Okay, so the 4 times that you were arrested, it all had to do with open carry?
Yes, I've been falsely arrested 5 times, but 4 of them were for open carry.
Interesting. What was, just out of curiosity, what was the 5th time?
I was filming the police harassing bikers.
Okay, all right. So, all right. So you and law enforcement have an interesting relationship. Is that fair to say?
Well, yes, and I'm retired law enforcement, which is the irony of it all. But yes.
Yeah. So, okay. So you were open carrying. I'm going to ask why, but you don't have to have a reason why. But I'm just to set up context for the story. You don't have to justify why you were doing it. But what was the context of the story? You were open carrying a pistol, a rifle, and what were you doing?
Yeah, so I'll actually answer the question why anyway, but I think it's the same answer you'd probably give, and the answer is because I can. But here's the context. The context is my son was working on his Eagle Scout merit badge, and there was only one special like badge that he had to get before he could earn Eagle Scout, and that was either hiking, biking, or swimming. So I said, all right, Chris, which one do you want to do? Because I'm very involved in my kid's life. I wanted to help him out. I was like, whichever one you want to do, I'll help you get it because they're not easy. He's like, well, let's do hiking. I said, okay. And we live out in the country. And so I said, well, go ahead and plan your routes because he had to plan 3 different routes. It's two 10-mile hikes and one 25-mile hike. And so I said, just plan them out here in the country, make a big loop or something and we'll go out there. Well, whenever I'm walking, whenever I'm in my tractor, anywhere out in the farm, I have a rifle on me at all times. And because we do have wild boars out here, we also have wildcats, the giant wildcats, not the little kittens and stuff you see in an alley. And so I always keep a rifle when I'm on foot or in the tractor in the field on me. And so when we did this walk, I had my rifle on me, and that's the whole reason for it was really self-defense. Halfway through our first 10-mile hike, I hear a voice behind me, and I turn around, there's a police officer back there. He doesn't have his lights on or anything. I immediately put my hands down to my side, show that I'm not any threat. He said something. He said something to me and I was like, excuse me? And he says, because I said, how you doing? And he said, fine, don't be touching it. And I was like, excuse me? And he said, don't be touching it. And I'm like, touching what? I'm like, what is he talking about? So he walks up to me and he says, what are you doing? I said, we're hiking. He's like, oh, hiking, huh? And then he grabs my rifle, which is in front of me, and he picks it up and he's like, is there some reason why you have this? And I said what I told you at the beginning of this, because I can. It was a weird question for me. And so I asked it in a very inquisitive manner, like, because I can. He's like, oh, okay. And then he goes to take it off by unclipping my sling. Well, I had just gotten back from Afghanistan at this point. This was 2013. I just gotten back from Afghanistan. I'm a combat veteran. And when somebody grabs your gun, our instinct is, whoa, what do you think you're doing? And so I immediately put my hand on the buttstock and the barrel. I was like, what do you think you're doing? But then I immediately came to my senses. So it's all of maybe half a second. Right. And then I put my hands up. However, the police officer unholstered his gun, stuck it to the back of my head in front of my child, and slammed me onto the hood of his car with the gun right to the back of my head. And at that point, that's when I turned on my camera. And the reason I had a camera too is because part of the merit badge is you're supposed to document your progress. And so we had the cameras so that we could film areas out there in the country while we're doing our hike, and I could take little segments and be able to provide it to the board for the Eagle Scout. So that's what happened. That's why I had my gun out there.
I remember you telling, I believe it was your son. I remember you telling him like, "Hey, keep the camera on me," and
yes.
your son filmed the interaction. I don't know. California open carry laws have changed. I know what they are currently, but I know they've changed over the last 15 years or so. What are the open carry laws in Texas? Or
so
what
right
were
now,
they at the time?
Yeah, at the time, you could open carry a rifle anywhere. There's literally no law on where you can carry a rifle other than prohibited places, like courthouses, schools, things like that. Yeah.
So you could loaded open carry a rifle in Texas pretty much anywhere. Yep. But on top of that, you were clearly dressed for a hike. And what I mean by that,
I mean, I had my water pack on me. Yeah. I had my boonie cap.
But you weren't.
I've got skin cancer, so that's why I had the big red bandana covering my neck.
Yeah, you didn't look. I mean, you didn't look paramilitary in any way. In other words, you didn't look like you were staging a protest or something like that. And you were, you know what I mean? You look like you were, out for a hike. I mean, you were wearing hiking clothes and kind of, dressed in like sportswear, really, more than, you weren't dressed suspiciously for any reason. You were also out in the country. It's not like you were, you were in a very rural area. You weren't even in a suburban area, let alone an urban area. And what do you think the deal was? Why was this cop so overzealous?
I think it's a combination of two things. You've got a police officer with a power trip, and you've got a first sergeant that's hard-headed. And those two powers came together, and you've got a power tripping cop and a hard-headed first sergeant who's not going to have his rights violated. And I think in any of those kinds of situations, the cops, they don't want to lose. They don't want to back down. They don't want to recognize that they're wrong. They just want to continue to assert their power and control over the situation. I think this was just a bad cop. And this bad cop probably thought he could get away with it. And I don't play that game. I went overseas twice to fight for the very rights I was exercising that day. And I was, I'll be damned if I'm going to fight for someone else's rights in a foreign country and then come home and just surrender them and freely. It's just not going to happen. And that's really what happened that day. It was just, I didn't do as I was told. And
what were the results? Did you get arrested? Did you get charged?
So I got arrested. Initially, I got arrested for resisting arrest. That, of course, there needs to be an arrest for you to resist. So that charge got thrown out. Then they tried to get me for disorderly conduct. In Texas, it is a crime to carry a firearm, quote, in a manner calculated to cause alarm. They tried to get me on that, but of course, my attorney is like, well, who was he alarming? The cows? Yeah. And so that got thrown out. Then they tried to get me for walking down the wrong side of the street. In Texas, if you're in the road, if there's a sidewalk, you're required to use the sidewalk. If there is no sidewalk, you're required to walk down the side of the road facing traffic. I'm in the middle of the country. This road I'm on, you can barely fit two cars down anyway. And of course, but that wasn't what they wanted because that's a Class C misdemeanor. It's a ticket. And they had to justify their arrest. So they eventually settled on interference with the duties of a peace officer. And apparently it's their duty to illegally disarm people. And when I put my hands on my gun for that half a second, that constituted interference with the duties of a peace officer. Went to trial. We won the first one on a hung jury. They retried me the second time, even more corrupt than the first one. And I was ultimately convicted of interference. And I faced up to $2,000 fine and 6 months in jail. But the jury only gave me a fine. They didn't give me any jail time because they saw also how stupid this was. And then I paid my fine $2,000 in nickels because the prosecuting attorney was named Jim Nichols. So I paid my nickels for nickels.
Jeez. So how does that affect your gun rights? Is that, you're done, you're over, you paid your fine and everything's okay? Or did you have to give up some gun rights for a while or?
Oh, no, no. I mean, I had to give up. I just had to give up the guns that they took from me until I was able to get them back. So Texas is interesting. Even I got my guns back as soon. Now we appealed this. It took 4 years. We appealed it, and the courts kept finding qualified immunity because the court said, well, he had every right to stop you because you were walking down the wrong side of the road, even though that was never mentioned. I asked him 26 times on the side of the road, what crime do you suspect me of committing? He never once said walking down the side of the road, because that's not why he stopped me. He said, as soon as I can find out you can legally carry this gun. I said, nope, that's not how the law works. Why are you stopping me? But the courts held that just because later they argued, well, when we did our suppression hearing for the first time, the prosecutor said, so officer, was he committing a crime in your presence? And the officer said, yes. And I looked at my lawyer and like, oh, this is going to be good. What crime was I committing? He says, he was walking down the wrong side of the road. And literally the entire courtroom erupted in laughter over this whole thing. And that was the first time we'd ever heard that. So the higher courts at the appeals level gave him qualified immunity and denied our appeals because there was probable cause for the stop. Probable cause.
So I got to tell you, it's something I think about fairly often, and gun owners and our relationship with law enforcement. On the one hand, law enforcement is a subset of gun owners. If you take all the gun owners in the world, they're a subset of that group. But so are criminals. You have shotgun guys and rifle guys and collectors and hunters and shooters and criminals and cops. And, there's a lot of subsets, there's a lot of smaller groups in that larger group. But still, on the one hand, they're gun owners. They're fellow gun owners. On the other hand, they're the ones that are going to come take your guns when these horrible gun laws pass. And so many, in California anyway, so many horrible gun laws come down the pike and they exempt themselves and then don't fight for us. And I just go back and forth. And it's also really tough to talk about cops in general because there are so many great people that want to be good law enforcement officers and work hard and are good law enforcement officers. But there's so many that aren't. And it's such a tough subject. And there are gun owners, there are Second Amendment activists who are extremely pro law enforcement. And there are Second Amendment activists that are extremely anti law enforcement. And then there's everything in between. And I don't know, what are your thoughts on that?
And I say this, what I'm about to say, a lot of people aren't going to like, but I want, this right here these are my retired, somewhere right there on the wall there. That's my retired badge and credentials on the wall right there, right above my shoulder. So I say this as a retired law enforcement, federal, but as retired law enforcement. I don't think any gun owner should blatantly, unconditionally support law enforcement. This back the blue stuff, if you're a gun owner, all you're doing is you're supporting your own demise. That doesn't mean that all cops are bad. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that there aren't enough good cops that it's not a danger to your rights. The police force is not a danger to your rights. So you should always suspect every single police officer that you come in contact with when you are lawfully armed, that person is going to try and disarm you, because even the so-called good cops will say, well, for my safety, I need to take your gun off while I'm talking to you, even if it's a traffic stop. That's not a police officer that supports gun rights. The ones that I like, and they're out there, but I treat every cop the way they treat me. If you come at me and you're respectful, I'm incredibly respectful. But what we as gun owners need to understand is that law enforcement is an extension of government. Government is the biggest threat to your rights, every right that we have right now. The biggest threat is government. And law enforcement are government. And so you have to treat them with suspicion at least. I tell everyone, my clients especially, first of all, don't answer any questions. But second, treat that officer with the same respect he treats you. If he comes up and he's nice and he's friendly, be nice and friendly back. You don't need to do the F the police this and F you that. And and all that kind of stuff. Because if he's treating you with respect, treat him back with respect. We need to really get back to that mutual respect. But if a police officer comes at you and they're trying to disarm you, or they're trying to make up reasons to disarm you, that is not your friend. And you should be just as vocal as you are supportive. You should be just as vocal against bad cops as you are supportive for good cops. I come under just because of my experience and being in Open Carry, Texas, and leading this group since 2013 and seeing all the rest. And now that I'm an attorney, I'm even more jaded about law enforcement, because I can't tell you how many times I'm reading through police reports and I'm watching the body cam and I'm thinking there's two different cases going on here, because the police put on their police reports what they want a prosecutor to see so they can charge this person, or what they want a grand jury to see so they can indict a person. And the grand jury doesn't see the video of what happened. They can only go off of what's on the probable cause affidavit. And so I just don't think, if you are a gun owner, you should suspect as a danger and a threat to your rights every single police officer out there, until they give you a reason not to.
Well, you know what I think is shocking for people, and I learned this firsthand, is I walk around, most people walk around knowing, hey, I'm a good guy. You know, I don't break the law. I don't want to hurt anybody. I'm not trying to get away with anything. And so they think when they have an interaction with a police officer, that police officer knows that. You know, hey, they're here to protect and serve, and they're talking about me. They're here to protect and serve me. But the reality is that cop just dealt with, 47 scumbags that day. He's not your friend. He or she's not your friend. And oh, by the way, they're kind of trained to act like your friend in order to get, incriminating information out of you. So I think that it's a big shock to people when they're in some kind of investigation, no matter how big or small, like, hey, this guy's my buddy. This cop's my friend. I'm a good guy. This cop knows I'm a good guy. They're there to protect and serve me. And none of that's true. That cop's going to treat you the exact same way he or she treats everybody else that they interact with. And unfortunately, most of the people they interact with are scumbags and liars. So I think that realization, I don't think it has to make you too cynical towards cops, but I think it should definitely make you protective and cautious and uncooperative, and I don't mean adversarial, but I tell everybody, be professional, but never cooperative. You do not have to cooperate with your own investigation, or an investigation against yourself. And I like I said, I think people need to, I'm not saying be adversarial or provocative, but hey, I need to search your vehicle. No, I don't consent to any searches. You don't have to cooperate and say, yeah, you should search my vehicle. I'm a good guy. You're a cop.
Yeah. And I can't tell you how many times, very innocent people that they've broken no laws.
Yeah.
And they because there's this mindset that we as gun owners have, and I'm sure there will probably be people on this video going, oh, if you've got nothing to fear, why would you not consent? If you got nothing to hide. Well, that's not the point of the Fourth Amendment. The point of the Fourth Amendment is to prevent any unreasonable searches and seizures. And my response to that is, well, since I have nothing to hide, you have no reason to search my vehicle. It's that simple. And you're right, because I have clients that they're doing absolutely nothing wrong. And hey, you mind if I search the vehicle? Oh, not at all. And they go and they search the vehicle, and they find some grass clippings. And oh, this is shake. And then next thing you know, you're under arrest for weed that's really nothing more than grass. And or since I'm a Second Amendment attorney, what I find most often is when they find a gun in the car. And at least here in Texas, you can have a gun in your car. It can be loaded, unloaded, one in the chamber, not in the chamber. You can have a 100 round magazine or a 10 round magazine. It doesn't matter. You can have 50 guns in your car. You can have one gun in your car. But these people are not breaking any laws. And also, by the way, in Texas and in the Fifth Circuit, they have found the law that bans guns from 18 to 20-year-olds as unconstitutional. I think some of the other circuits have found that as well. And so, my client will be 19, 20 years old. There's a gun in the vehicle. And by the way, in Texas, even if you're 16 years old and you're in your own vehicle, you can have a gun in the car. as long as you're the driver.
Mm-hmm.
And then they will charge this person who allowed them to search the car. The cop finds a gun in the center console, gets all upset, and charges him with unlawful carry because he's only 18 or 19. And I've got to go in there and sue the cop because he should have known that you can't enforce that law because it was ruled unconstitutional.
Wow.
But, had he not allowed the search to begin with, they would have never found that gun at all. And here's the thing. If you get pulled over for a traffic violation,
Mm-hmm.
There's no reason for them to do a search of your vehicle because they're pulling you over for a traffic violation. And if they're asking to search the vehicle, they're unlawfully and unconstitutionally extending the reason for that search. And that's a Fourth Amendment violation. So you should never do that. Just say, look, officer, I've given you my license. Everything you need to know is on my license. This is what I tell my clients. Anytime they ask a question, hey, where are you going? Officer, everything you need to know is on my license. Where are you coming from? Everything you need to know is on my license. You got any guns in the car? Officer, everything you need to know is on my license. Or you can say, with all due respect, I prefer not to answer any questions. Everything you need is on my license. Like, literally be a broken record. Every single question they ask you, officer, with all due respect, I don't want to answer any questions. Everything you need to know is on my license. Now, what I do with my clients, I've got my business card here. I say, give them my business card. When you open it up, it says, notice to law enforcement. And it's got all the rights on there. You probably can't see that, it's a little too small, but it's got all my clients' rights. I say, don't answer any questions, hand them my card, open it up, and tell them to read that. That's everything they need to know.
Wow.
And it's just, I do not consent to searches. I do not want to answer questions without my attorney. I'm not going to answer any questions about where I've been or my day or any of that kind of stuff. And that's what we've got to get into. And too many people think that doing that is disrespectful. Well, do it in a respectful manner. Like I said, don't say, F you, I ain't answering no questions.
Right.
Just with all due respect, I'm not going to answer any questions, and everything you need is on my license. Even to the point, I mean, this is me personally. If they say, is this your current address? Officer, with all due respect, everything you need to know is on my license. I literally answer 0 questions. I don't care. Well, I need to know if this is your current address. Officer, everything you need to know is on my license. That's it.
Well, okay, so we've I think we've sufficiently beat up on cops. Let's beat up on bureaucrats now. So they took your gun. How was it getting your gun back? Talk a little bit about that.
It was a fight because as long as you're on appeal on a case, that case has the potential, any level all the way up to the Supreme Court, can remand your case back to trial and tell the court, do it right this time. And so for that reason, they have to keep everything as evidence as long as the appeals process is going on. In my case, that took 4 years. Once I abandoned my last appeal, which was an appeal to the Supreme Court because I ran out of money, I had no money. I abandoned my appeal, then I was able to get my guns back. And depending on where you are, at least in Texas, and depending on which state you're in, the laws vary on what that means. In some states, if it's a violation of any law involving a firearm, even if you didn't use the firearm, but it's the possession of it or not telling the police officer, the duty to notify, because some states have a duty to notify where you have to tell the police officer that you're armed. Texas is not one of them. Then they can keep that gun after the case is all over with. In Texas, unless you're a prohibited person or unless the firearm is an illegal firearm, they are required to give it back to you. And that's what it took me 4 years to do that. And that's what I do a lot for clients now is when they've been falsely arrested and I get their case dismissed, the prosecutors and the judge try to, okay, well, we're going to dismiss this, but I'm going to order that they seize your weapon. I'm going to say, nope, judge, you can't do that. You have no authority to do that. Here's the case law. Here's the actual law that says you shall return the firearm. And that's how I get my clients' guns back.
Wow.
And that's one of the things that Self-Defense Fund does for their clients is they don't just defend you in court, but they fight to get your gun back.
So talk about Self-Defense Network. What give us the lowdown, and what are some of the benefits and what they do.
So Self-Defense Fund, it's exactly what it sounds like. It's self-defense. It's a fund for people who have to use self-defense, and then they end up either civilly charged or criminally charged. And it's really anything to do with, I take cases that are aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, I haven't done a murder case yet, although I've assisted with a murder case on self-defense grounds. But the bottom line is it's dangerous in America to use your gun and not be protected, because even if you don't face criminal charges, there are cases all over the internet. You probably remember a story, I think it was actually out in California, where there was a robbery of a convenience store, and the convenience store guy shot the robber, killed him, and then the family sued him for wrongful death because our poor boy, he didn't deserve to die. All he was doing was stealing.
Yeah,
at gunpoint.
That's happened more than once. In fact, you remember the Hollywood shootout in the 90s?
Yes.
The two guys. Well, the family of one of the robbers tried to sue because basically the guy got shot, but he bled out and died because they couldn't get an ambulance to him. And so the family, his surviving family, sued because for wrongful death. Well, they couldn't get an ambulance to him because everything was shut down because this guy just robbed a bank and had a shootout with cops. Like, it was all completely 100% his fault, but the family still, decided to hire an attorney. So there's a lot of those stories. Yeah. I don't think it's specific to California, but California, we love our attorneys and our lack of self-responsibility. So yeah.
Well, that's what Self-Defense Fund does, is they defend you. It's, people have heard of other companies like USCCA and all of that, and Self-Defense Fund is a little bit smaller. To the extent that they don't do all the glossy advertising. It's $12.50 a month. It's unlimited attorney's fees if you have to defend yourself. It's and then up to $1 million in excess fees, like expert witness fees, scene cleanup. One of the things a lot of people don't realize is if somebody breaks into your house and you have to shoot them, it kind of gets messy. And it's up to you to clean up that mess. And there are a lot of cities and states have ordinances and codes that when it's biological in nature, you have to have certain licensed or qualified people come and clean up that contamination. That contamination can be brain matter, blood, whatever, that's all over your carpet now, or your daughter's bedroom where the guy climbed through the window and started attacking your daughter. And they will pay for that scene cleanup as well as any defense if you're charged or if somebody sues you for that shooting. And that's all Self-Defense Fund does is litigation. They are a litigation firm. That's what makes them a little bit different than everyone else. You're not going to get, all these overpaid magazines, because a lot of the stuff that you buy when you get these other companies, you're paying for advertisements, you're paying for glossy magazines, you're paying for nice giant websites and magazine articles and things like that. Self-Defense Fund, all they do is they defend you when you have to defend yourself. And it's not just guns. If you end up having to use a candlestick, it's anything. If your guard dog mauls the intruder and they sue you, your guard dog is your self-defense tool. They will defend you. So that's what they do.
So Self-Defense Fund keeps costs down by focusing on the primary thing, which is defending you if you're in some kind of legal trouble. The training and the flash and all the other stuff, you don't have that. You don't rely on that. You rely on word of mouth and the quality of the work you do, and that's how you're able to keep it affordable.
Correct. And they're good in all 50 states. They're good on the tribal lands. They're good in the U.S. territories. You don't have to pay extra to get all 50 state coverage. You don't have to have a license in order to be covered. And here's the thing: if it's about lawful self-defense. So let's say you're in a state where you're not allowed to carry a firearm into a bank, but you're concealing your firearm in a bank because you know that banks get robbed and you want to defend yourself if necessary. And let's say while you're in that bank with that pistol and somebody goes to rob you and you shoot them, that's still self-defense. You're still covered, even though you're in a place where you're not supposed to technically have a gun, as long as that self-defense itself is covered, is a lawful self-defense. Now, if all you're charged with is, carrying a firearm in an illegal place, that's not what Self-Defense Fund does, because that's a whole separate charge. So if they find that it was a justifiable homicide or a justifiable shooting in self-defense, then you don't really need self-defense fund. But I will also tell you, in those kinds of cases, and based on the facts, self-defense fund has a separate fund where if they want to challenge the constitutionality of a law of one of their members that they're charged with, for example, carrying in a bank, right? Mm-hmm. You shouldn't be disarmed carrying into a bank. You're just as susceptible there as you are walking to the bank or walking from the bank. There's a possibility that SDF would take that case anyway, even though it's not self-defense related, just to challenge that law, which should rightly be challenged.
Awesome. Okay. So self-defense fund, what's your website?
Self-defense fund, that's FUND, selfdefensefund.com. Very easy, or .net, either one.
Okay, perfect. Anything else you want our listeners to know about the Second Amendment or guns or self-defense fund or anything?
Yeah, so what's the only other thing I wanted to add, and I don't know how much time you got, but I'll make it quick.
Sure.
The first thing you do, people are like, well, what do I do after a self-defense fund shoot or a self-defense shooting? What do I do? So the very first thing that you do is call your attorney. Okay, the guy's already dead. He's not getting any deader. You don't need to call 911. Call your attorney and say, hey, I just had this incident. What do I do? And then you can either call 911 together, or your attorney will say, go ahead and call 911. Just tell them that there's been a shooting, you feared for your life, and you defended yourself, and that's it. Don't answer any other questions. All they need to know, all that 911 needs to know is 911, I'm at this address. This person broke into my house. This person threatened me and I feared for my life. I shot this person. That's it. Don't go into any more details. That's all that they need to know. Anything else that you say can and will likely be misinterpreted and used against you. And remember, you always shoot to stop the threat. You don't shoot to kill. Now, hopefully that's the end result. But you never shoot to kill. You shoot to stop the threat.
Talk about why is that an important distinction?
Well, because killing is a sometimes subjective, sometimes objective act. And if you try to show the intent to kill somebody without showing that there's a threat in that intent, that can be used against you, and that could go to your motive. Like, well, did you really shoot to kill them, or did you shoot them? I mean, because could you have done something else? And then you don't have to worry about all those questions, because when you say you shoot to kill, now you've got to answer all the questions and deal with the fact pattern of, well, what if you could have done something else? Whereas when you say that I felt threatened and I stopped the threat, that's it. You don't have to worry about any of that. You're talking about a threat, and then let your attorney handle all of that. But the fact is, the less you say, the better. And anything else you say, they're just it's gonna go to that intent, really. And intent is a really weird, difficult thing to prove in some cases, and in other cases, it's very easy to prove. Because remember, intent is by what you say. The way to prove people's intent is, okay, what did they say? In other words, if I say, I'm going to beat you to death, and then I beat you to death, it's obvious that my intent was based on what I said, I'm going to beat you to death, and or what I did, I'm going to beat you to death. So even if I didn't say it, but I did it, well, now my intent is determined based on what I did. If, that's why you just don't say, I shot to kill, because killing's bad, but defending yourself is good.
That is a often misunderstood distinction when it comes to using lethal force, but I think it's a very important one. The legality is extremely important. The morality is important too. I don't want to kill anybody. I want to use lethal force until to stop a threat, to stop someone. If that means I use lethal force but they don't die, that's even better. I'm not some kind of macho hero, whatever. This isn't a movie. This is real life. So, I think both are important, the legality and the morality of it. So I'm glad.
And everybody needs to understand, no matter how justified you are in shooting somebody, you have to live with the consequences of that shooting for the rest of your life. Ask any combat veteran, anyone in combat who has had to shoot somebody, deals with that every day of their life. They don't regret it. They did what they had to do. They were justified in doing what they did, but they still live with the fact that they had to take another human life. So make sure that that's exactly what you had to do to stay alive. Because when you do that, we all talk about, you hear it all the time from gun owners, like, oh man, two to the head and one to the chest, and it's all machismo, but when you actually have to do it, it affects you mentally, and people have to be prepared for that.
Very well said. Did your son make Eagle Scout?
He did, yeah. Literally, I think he got everything done 4 hours before the deadline where he aged out.
Congratulations to him. That's fantastic.
Yeah,
Only Eagle Scouts have walked on the moon, right?
Right. Exactly. Yeah. That's true.
Yeah. So what an accomplishment. The PhD, what is it? The PhD of boyhood. So my congratulations to him. That's a great accomplishment. And congratulations to you for being such a good dad. I got to tell you, it's a team accomplishment. Mom and dad supporting is a big part of getting to Eagle Scouts. So that's awesome. CJ, thank you so much. Give the website one more time so people can check it out.
Sure. It's selfdefensefund.com. And the email, I think, actually, I'm not going to give you the email. I think they changed it. I don't remember what the new email is.
But check out selfdefensefund.com and see if it's right for you. And CJ, thanks, man. This is great. I look forward to having you on the show again. I think you're a very well-spoken, excellent resource. I enjoyed your story very much. We might post a link to the video so people can see the video of you on your hike, because it's pretty fascinating. I can see why you were motivated to become an attorney. So, but thank you.
Well, what's interesting is that that hike was just sort of what made me become an activist. Being an activist and getting arrested and tased and having my head cracked open and almost parked by the police for open carrying. That's what caused me to be an attorney.
Geez. Well, thank you for all you do.
Thank you, sir. Thanks for all you do as well.